After nearly 2 decades of depriving the audience of another fascinating adventure of Indiana Jones, the production team finally made a groundbreaking comeback with Kingdom of the Crystal Skull in 2008. Written by George Lucas and directed by Steven Spielberg, the movie still starred the enigmatic Harrison Ford, making it more thrilling and adventurous as usual. But is there something they must have hidden from the fans? Let's find out the truth in these 20 weird facts. Number 20. Harrison Ford didn't recognize Cate Blanchett without a wig. Cate Blanchett is regarded as one of her generation's most versatile and recognizable performers. She's so popular that it seems almost impossible that anyone, let alone a co-star, could fail to recognize her. But Harrison Ford couldn't remember her without a wig while filming Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Blanchett's role as the cold Soviet villain Irina Spalko required her to wear a sharply cut black bob wig, a stiff military uniform, and a cold presence on screen. That strong, stylized appearance made her instantly memorable as a character. However, when Blanchett walked on set without her wig, Ford didn't know who she was. While playing Irina Spalko, she gave audiences a memorable antagonist with a commanding presence. Harrison Ford, who had spent most of his screen time with her while she was fully costumed, had trouble connecting the glamorous actress off-camera with the severe Soviet villain he had been battling on screen. It's also a funny reminder of the power of wigs and makeup in filmmaking. A simple change of hairstyle or adding a military outfit can make someone look like a completely different person. This story also highlights another aspect of filmmaking, which conveys the odd intimacy that comes with actors only knowing each other in costume. Ford and Blanchett worked closely as adversaries, trading lines and sharing physical fight sequences. Yet, the characters they played, rather than their authentic selves, shaped much of their interaction. Fans often love stories like this because they humanize movie stars. We tend to imagine that actors instantly recognize each other, share glamorous friendships, and never confuse faces. Yet here we see Ford, one of the most iconic stars in Hollywood history, admitting that he once didn't recognize his Oscar-winning co-star without her costume. In the end, this funny moment became one of many weird behind-the-scenes moments that make Kingdom of the Crystal Skull such a fascinating production. Number 19. The original villains were Nazis. When the first 3 Indiana Jones films were released in the 1980s, the Nazis made perfect villains. They were ruthless, powerful, and instantly recognizable as a force of evil. By the time Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull entered production in the mid-2000s, the production team thought to bring back the Nazis, but Steven Spielberg had strong feelings about it. Depicting Nazis in the extreme, sensational style of an Indiana Jones adventure no longer sat right with him. He felt it would be disrespectful to use them as cartoon villains after he had spent years documenting their real-world atrocities with such seriousness. That decision forced the filmmakers to search for a new antagonist who would feel historically relevant and menacing in the 1950s setting. The Cold War provided the answer. By moving the action from World War II to the height of American-Soviet tensions, the writers introduced the Soviets. Irina Spalko, a psychic KGB agent obsessed with harnessing alien knowledge to gain control over the world, became the embodiment of this threat. This change was more than just a matter of political correctness. It fundamentally shaped the film's tone. Still, some fans were disappointed. They believed that the Nazis were the quintessential Indiana Jones villains, and the Soviets didn't carry the same cinematic weight. Number 18. Spielberg's daughter plays the girl who punches the mutt. One of the most amusing little Easter eggs in Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull is that director Steven Spielberg snuck his daughter into the movie and gave her one of the most memorable small moments. In the diner scene where Shia LaBeouf's character Mutt Williams gets into a scuffle, a young woman throws a punch that lands squarely on him. That girl was no other than Spielberg's real-life daughter, Sasha Spielberg. Sasha is the second child of Spielberg, and she has occasionally dipped her toes into acting and music under the name Buzzy Lee. While The Crystal Skull was being filmed, she was a teenager, and her cameo was Spielberg's way of letting her be part of the defining moments of his career. The diner scene itself is a significant one. It captures a clash of youth culture in the 1950s. In the middle of the chaos, Sasha's moment happens when tempers flare, and she delivers a punch that pushes the tension forward. Sasha thought the cameo was a fun memory and never considered it an opportunity to enter mainstream acting. Ultimately, the moment adds a small but charming layer to Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Number 17. Sean Connery was asked to return, but he declined. Many fans of Indiana Jones had thought that Sean Connery would reprise his role as Professor Henry Jones Sr. His appearance in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade was widely praised, with critics and audiences alike calling his pairing with Harrison Ford one of the best father-son dynamics ever put on screen. So it was natural for fans to expect him to at least make a cameo in Crystal Skull. In fact, Spielberg and George Lucas did extend an invitation to Connery for a role that wasn't central. Perhaps Henry Sr. would have appeared briefly at Indy's home, offering advice or a funny remark before fading into the background. However, Connery had retired from acting in 2003. When approached, he politely declined, stating that retirement was too enjoyable to give up. In a later statement, Connery said, "I could have come out of retirement to play Henry Jones again, but in the end, retirement is just too much fun." That short but firm response closed the door on his return, leaving Spielberg and Lucas to rethink the script. Connery's decision not to return had a ripple effect. Without Henry Sr., the filmmakers leaned more heavily on Marion Ravenwood, who re-entered Indy's life after decades away. This reunion provided emotional closure for Indy differently, shifting the focus from his relationship with his father to his role as a partner, and eventually, a father himself. However, fans remain divided on Connery's absence. Some feel the film would have benefited from his humor, believing his presence could have grounded certain extreme moments. In hindsight, though, Connery's refusal to return deprived fans of seeing one of cinema's most iconic duos reunited. It also preserved the integrity of his character. Number 16. Ford did most of his own stunts. By the time Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull went into production, Harrison Ford was 64 years old. For most actors, that would be the perfect excuse to hand off the action sequences to stunt doubles, especially in the case of Indiana Jones, which is usually physically demanding. However, Ford wasn't like most actors. Ford insisted on performing most of his stunts, proving that age hadn't diminished his appetite for adventure. Ford has always believed that part of what makes Indiana Jones so compelling is his vulnerability. Unlike superheroes, Indy gets punched, thrown around, and makes mistakes. Audiences see him bleed and sweat, which makes him more human and relatable. Ford felt that the illusion would break if he surrendered too many stunts to doubles. On set, this commitment impressed the crew and his younger co-star, Shia LaBeouf. LaBeouf later admitted he was stunned by Ford's energy, describing him as a monster regarding physical endurance. That doesn't mean there weren't risks. One perilous moment came during the jungle chase sequence, where Ford had to leap between moving vehicles while fighting off enemies. Despite all the safety measures put in place by the stunt coordinators, Ford still took hard hits and bruises. He even narrowly avoided injury when a mistimed bomb explosion went off too close to him, but Ford shrugged it off, treating it as part of the job. His determination to perform stunts also extended to more minor physical details. For instance, he practiced cracking the bullwhip until it was second nature, refusing to let computer-generated imagery replace the iconic weapon. He also threw himself into choreographed fistfights, preferring to take real falls to make the action believable. The result was that Crystal Skull retained the physical energy of earlier Indiana Jones films, despite being made decades later. Ultimately, Ford proved that Indiana Jones wasn't just a character, but a persona that Ford embodied with his whole being. Number 15. Mutt Williams is a homage to composer John Williams. When Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull hit theaters in 2008, fans were introduced to Mutt Williams, played by Shia LaBeouf. They don't know that behind the scenes, the name Mutt Williams is a hidden homage to composer John Williams, one of the most essential creative forces in the Indiana Jones franchise. John Williams, of course, was the man behind the soaring Raiders March that instantly conjures images of Indy racing through jungles and battling Nazis. Spielberg and George Lucas believed Indiana Jones wouldn't feel complete without Williams's music. His score accompanied the action, defined the mood, and turned scenes into iconic moments. So when George Lucas and Steven Spielberg were brainstorming a name for Indy's son, they ended up with Mutt Williams. By naming Indy's son after Williams, the filmmakers embedded a tribute to the composer directly into the story. From a symbolic standpoint, naming Mutt after Williams also reinforced the theme of generational continuity. Just as Indy passed his knowledge and adventures on to his son, Spielberg and Lucas acknowledged that Williams had been there all along, shaping the drama from the shadows with his music. Indy's whip cracks, daring escapes, and globe-trotting adventures wouldn't have carried the same emotional resonance without him. Number 14. Spielberg made sure Marion came back. Indiana Jones had met several love interests across the films, but only Marion Ravenwood had truly captured the audience's heart. Played by Karen Allen, Marion wasn't just another romantic partner, but Indy's equal, a fiery and independent woman who had been with him since the beginning in Raiders of the Lost Ark. By the time the fourth film was in development, George Lucas had several story ideas floating around. Some versions didn't include Marion at all. Instead of featuring a new love interest or skipping over the romance angle entirely, Steven Spielberg felt strongly that the drama needed to return to its roots. Spielberg pushed for Marion's inclusion, believing the story would feel incomplete without revisiting that relationship. He reportedly told Lucas and the writers that they couldn't ignore the one woman fans still remembered and rooted for if they brought Indy back for another adventure. When Karen Allen was invited to return, she was thrilled. Fans were equally excited by the news of her. Spielberg's insistence also gave the film an emotional backbone. Without Marion, Crystal Skull might have felt like just another adventure, but with her it became a story about reconnection. In hindsight, the return of Marion Ravenwood was one of the most universally praised elements. Number 13. The movie sparked alien conspiracies. Who could have thought that Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull could stir up a wave of alien conspiracy theories the way it did? Of course, the plot revolved around mysterious crystal skulls tied to ancient civilizations. Therefore, as soon as audiences saw Indy chasing down extraterrestrial beings, conspiracy theorists and UFO enthusiasts latched onto the story. The origins of this fascination trace back to the real-world crystal skulls that have been circulating for more than a century. Several skull-shaped carvings, allegedly discovered in ancient Mayan and Aztec ruins, were promoted as mystical artifacts with unknown powers. By the 20th century, fringe researchers began to claim they were not of earthly origin at all, but instead gifts from aliens who visited ancient civilizations. Scientists have long debunked these claims. Even modern testing revealed that most of the skulls were crafted with 19th-century tools, not ancient ones, but they were still lost in the aura of mystery. When George Lucas and Steven Spielberg incorporated this myth into the film, they leaned into the science fiction angle more than ever. The climactic unveiling of a full alien skeleton with a saucer taking off into another dimension cleared all the doubts. Audiences had mixed reactions. Some loved the bold shift into UFO territory, while others felt it clashed with Indy's classic archaeological adventures. But outside of Hollywood, the film breathed new life into pre-existing conspiracy theories. Alien researchers and paranormal writers cited the movie as further evidence that governments and filmmakers were deliberately leaking the truth about extraterrestrial contact. Interestingly, the movie also reignited academic debates because it reintroduced the public to the ancient astronaut theory. While scientists dismissed the hype, the film undeniably influenced pop culture. Number 12. Shia LaBeouf admitted he hated the movie. Although some fans and critics voiced their disappointment when Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull was released in 2008, the most shocking was the criticism from Shia LaBeouf, who played Mutt Williams in the movie. He was the rebellious greaser with motorcycle skills and a chip on his shoulder, later revealed as Indiana Jones's son. LaBeouf was one of Hollywood's rising stars by 2008, Lucasfilm and Paramount Pictures reportedly saw him as the ideal choice to appeal to a younger generation. But after the film's release, LaBeouf publicly expressed regret about both the movie and his role in it. In a 2010 interview, he admitted, "You can blame it on the writer and you can blame it on Steven Spielberg, but the actor's job is to make it come alive, and I couldn't. So that's my fault. Simple." That honesty might have earned him points with some fans, but it caused severe tension in Hollywood. Director Spielberg has always maintained an old-school attitude about loyalty. Criticizing a film you worked on, especially in public, was a major betrayal for him. Shia later admitted he had lost the goodwill of Spielberg after those comments. Harrison Ford himself was asked about LaBeouf's comments, and here is his response. "I think he was a fucking idiot. As an actor, I think it's my obligation to support the film without making a complete ass of myself." That remark underscored the rift. Ford had always been known for his professionalism and believed in protecting the legacy of the films he worked on. In hindsight, LaBeouf's criticism of Crystal Skull didn't end well for him in Hollywood. He had been Hollywood's next big thing. Still, after his remarks and a series of personal controversies, his trajectory veered away from featuring in blockbusters to independent films and experimental art projects. So while Shia LaBeouf may have spoken the truth about Crystal Skull, it came at a cost. Number 11. The script went through many versions. The development history of Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull was complicated. Many audiences never knew that what they finally saw in theaters was the product of nearly 2 decades of rewrites, abandoned drafts, and endless debates between George Lucas, Steven Spielberg, and Harrison Ford. George Lucas was fascinated with science fiction themes and aliens, which he believed were a natural fit for a film set in the 1950s. Spielberg, however, wasn't convinced. He resisted the alien angle, worrying it would feel out of step with Indy's world. He preferred to stick with archaeology and mythology rather than UFOs. For years, this fundamental disagreement has halted progress. Spielberg finally relented on the alien idea by the early 2000s, provided Lucas would adjust the framing. Lucas rebranded them not as aliens but as interdimensional beings to soften the blow. Still, the core story of crystal skulls and ancient power remained. Eventually, screenwriter David Koepp was hired to write the shooting script. The result was what audiences saw in 2008. Some scenes felt like classic Indy, while others leaned heavily into Lucas's alien fascination. This blend created the uneven tone critics often cite as one of the film's weaknesses. Ultimately, Crystal Skull became a case study of what happens when too many visions collide. Number 10. Cate Blanchett's villain was inspired by classic Cold War stereotypes. Every Indiana Jones film has a memorable villain, and for Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, that role fell to Colonel Dr. Irina Spalko, played by Cate Blanchett. When George Lucas and Steven Spielberg decided to set the 4th Indiana Jones adventure in the Cold War era, they needed an antagonist that would rival the Nazis from the earlier films. By the 1950s, the Soviet Union was at the heart of cultural fears. Lucas leaned heavily into these tropes when sketching out Spalko. She wasn't just any Soviet agent, but a psychic warrior, obsessed with harnessing supernatural powers for the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. This was a nod to real-life Cold War paranoia, when both the US and Soviet governments funded strange research into psychic phenomena. When this role was given to Cate Blanchett, she embodied every bit of it. She reportedly studied Russian intonation to make her performance convincing. Blanchett suggested the blunt black bob haircut, saying she wanted Spalko to look sharp, severe, and almost inhuman. That hairstyle instantly became her most recognizable trait, separating her from Indy's previous foes. Critics and fans had mixed reactions to the character. Some praised Blanchett for committing fully to the campy, Cold War villain aesthetic. Others felt Spalko was too exaggerated, almost cartoonish, compared to Indy's more grounded foes of the past. Still, Blanchett herself embraced the role with enthusiasm. Number 9. Shia LaBeouf, trained with a professional fencer for the sword fight scenes. When Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull was developing, Steven Spielberg and George Lucas wanted to introduce a new character who could carry some of the action alongside Harrison Ford. That character became Mutt Williams, played by Shia LaBeouf. To give Mutt his standout moment, the filmmakers scripted a daring sword fight sequence aboard speeding vehicles in the Amazon jungle. Mutt faces Soviet agent Irina Spalko, while the two balance on opposite vehicles racing side by side. To prepare, Shia LaBeouf underwent months of training with a professional fencing coach to make the swordplay look authentic. LaBeouf's coach was an Olympic-level fencer who trained him in classical and theatrical sword techniques. Shia later admitted that he had never touched a sword before this role, but after months of training, he developed confidence and agility with the weapon. Cate Blanchett also trained for the sequence, but in interviews, she jokingly praised LaBeouf's crazy energy, saying he attacked the fencing rehearsals with the same fearless intensity as his character. The sequence itself was technically challenging to film. Both actors were strapped into rigs on top of moving vehicles with safety harnesses while swinging swords in close quarters. Because LaBeouf had trained so extensively, he could execute most of his strikes and parries on camera, adding to the realism. One funny episode from the rehearsals was that LaBeouf accidentally struck a crew member when he got carried away while practicing swings. Though no one was seriously hurt, it earned him the nickname Kid Whiplash among the stunt team. LaBeouf later said the sword fight was his favorite sequence in the movie because it made him feel like he was part of the Indiana Jones legacy. Number 8. Steven Spielberg was hesitant about using generated imagery, but George Lucas pushed for it. Despite the realism of Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, most of the visual effects were generated by CGI, a decision Spielberg never approved. By the mid-2000s, Hollywood had fully embraced CGI. George Lucas, who had revolutionized digital effects, was eager to use cutting-edge technology for Indy's fourth outing. Steven Spielberg, however, had built a reputation for grounding his blockbusters in practical effects, stunts, and real locations. The original Indiana Jones trilogy relied heavily on real sets, miniatures, matte paintings, and stunt performers rather than digital trickery. For Crystal Skull, Spielberg initially pushed to film as much as possible in camera. He wanted the jungle chases, ruins, and stunts to feel dusty, sweaty, and physical, just like Raiders of the Lost Ark. But Lucas insisted that some sequences could only be achieved through digital enhancements, such as the disastrous Nuke the Fridge explosion, the swarms of CGI ants, and the gravity-defying alien spaceship finale. The clash between Lucas's enthusiasm for CGI and Spielberg's practical instincts led to compromises. The most criticized result of this compromise was the jungle chase sequence. While Spielberg filmed portions of it with real vehicles in Hawaii, Lucas expanded it with digital vines, swinging monkeys, and an exaggerated sword fight on top of jeeps. Many fans felt the CGI was too obvious. Even Spielberg himself later admitted he regretted relying so much on digital effects. Whether audiences loved or hated it, the movie became a fascinating blend of classic practical stunt work and early 2000 digital spectacle. Number 7. The film's title ideas were wild. The movie team had trouble deciding on the right title before audiences saw Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Finding the right name for the fourth Indiana Jones adventure was no easy task. During the brainstorming sessions, a long list of working titles emerged that ranged from odd to overly ridiculous. At one point, George Lucas pushed hard for Indiana Jones and the Saucer Men. Lucas had been fascinated with UFO lore since the 1950s, and he wanted the movie to tie into the era's obsession with flying saucers. Another contender was Indiana Jones and the Giant Ants. This idea came from early script drafts, which included a terrifying sequence with swarms of oversized killer ants. The most questionable option was Son of Indiana Jones. This title hinted at Shia LaBeouf's character, Mutt Williams, who was eventually revealed to be Indy's son. The studio thought emphasizing Mutt in the title might appeal to younger audiences and set the stage for a possible spin-off, but Harrison Ford strongly opposed it. Dozens of other titles floated around the production offices, blending sensational science fiction phrases with archaeological mystery. Some insiders say close to 60 versions were pitched before they finally landed on Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Spielberg wasn't initially thrilled about that one, but Lucas convinced him it tied together the artifact and the alien storyline. Still, fans were divided when the final title was announced. Some loved the sensational feel, while others found it clunky and awkward compared to Raiders of the Lost Ark's sleek punch. The wild ride of brainstorming titles reflects how much was at stake in reviving such a beloved series. Number 6. Indy almost had a daughter instead of a son. One of the most significant decisions in shaping the story of Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull in its early development was the gender of Indy's child. Early script drafts imagined that Indiana Jones would have a daughter, not a son. The initial idea for a daughter came from screenwriters who wanted to introduce a strong, independent female character into Indy's life like Marion Ravenwood did decades earlier. Writers imagined a playful dynamic in which she would challenge Indiana in ways he hadn't experienced before, testing his patience, skills, and perhaps most importantly, his ego. But as the drafts evolved, Steven Spielberg grew concerned about how a daughter might fit the narrative. Spielberg wanted a child character who could physically participate in the action alongside Indiana, someone who could ride motorcycles, climb onto moving trucks, and duel with villains. Though a daughter could theoretically do these stunts, Spielberg and Lucas felt that audiences in 2008 would more readily accept a young male adventurer taking these physical risks. That's when the concept of Mutt Williams emerged. The character was written as a rebellious son, a greaser with attitude and courage, designed to mirror Indiana's youth while giving audiences a potential new hero for future sequels. Shia LaBeouf, cast as Mutt, embodies Indy's decisions and attitude. In the end, the father-son dynamic offered the film both comedy and emotional depth. Number 5. The movie's jungle scenes were filmed in Hawaii, not South America. When audiences watched Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, they imagined the jungles of Peru. But what they didn't realize, however, was that none of these scenes were actually filmed in South America. Instead, Steven Spielberg and his production team entirely recreated Hawaii's lush, exotic jungle. From the outset, the filmmakers knew that shooting in South America would present significant challenges. While Peru and the surrounding regions offered stunning landscapes, the unpredictable weather, limited infrastructure, and logistical hurdles made location shooting risky. With its dense tropical forests, versatile terrains, and well-established filming infrastructure, Hawaii fits the bill perfectly. The primary jungle sequences were shot primarily on Oahu, where production designers transformed parts of the forest to look convincingly South American. The team also imported specialized plants and vines to replicate the look of the Amazonian jungle. Special attention was paid to water features, which are prominent in the film's jungle chase scenes. Hawaii also offered the advantage of predictable weather conditions. While the Amazon is notoriously humid, rainy, and prone to sudden storms, the production team could select filming windows in Hawaii to ensure consistent lighting and safe working conditions. Visual effects further enhanced the illusion. CGI was used to extend the jungle beyond the natural limits of Hawaii's forests. Ultimately, filming in Hawaii instead of South America was a masterstroke in balancing safety, logistics, and cinematic spectacle. Number 4. Ford refused to dye his hair. One subtle but telling creative decision in Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull involved Harrison Ford's hair. Ford was in his mid-60s in 2008, and the character of Indiana Jones had aged naturally. Studio executives and makeup artists initially suggested that Ford dye his hair darker to make him look younger on screen. Ford, however, firmly refused. In interviews, he explained that dyeing his hair would be dishonest to his character. He argued that Indy's intelligence, courage, and ingenuity made him iconic, not the color of his hair or the absence of gray strands. Ford had always prioritized authenticity over vanity, and Indiana Jones was a perfect example. Keeping his natural hair also fits thematically with the fourth film. Set in 1957, the story presents Indy as a man confronting a new era of Cold War, UFO myths, and personal challenges, like discovering his long-lost son, Mutt Williams. Showing Indy's natural aging emphasized that he was no longer a reckless man in his 30s, but a mature, savvy adventurer whose experience was as valuable as his strength. Interestingly, the decision had practical benefits during filming. With natural hair, makeup, and lighting, teams could focus on enhancing realistic textures and expressions rather than trying to mask or alter color. Fans and critics took note of the choice, often praising the film for respecting the passage of time for its hero. Harrison Ford honored the character and audience by refusing to dye his hair. Number 3. A real-world Crystal Skull documentary coincided with the release. When Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull hit theaters, audiences were captivated by the mysterious, supernatural crystal skulls at the heart of the story. Interestingly, the movie's release coincided with a real-world documentary about these artifacts, adding a layer of curiosity and controversy to the film's launch. The science fiction channel, now known as Sci-Fi, aired a special documentary examining the origins, myths, and legends surrounding the crystal skulls roughly the same time the film premiered. The documentary explored claims that some crystal skulls were ancient Mesoamerican artifacts supposedly created by lost civilizations like the Maya or the Aztecs. The science fiction channel framed these skulls as objects of fascination and mystery, often leaving the viewer to wonder whether these legends could be true. However, skeptics and professional archaeologists pointed out that most, if not all, of the skulls were 19th-century creations. Scientific analysis, including microscopic examination, revealed that many had been carved using modern tools rather than ancient techniques. The coincidence of timing worked brilliantly for Lucasfilm's marketing team. While the movie presented aliens, psychic powers, and sensational adventure fantasy, the documentary gave audiences a real-world context. The simultaneous release of the documentary and the movie amplified the cultural conversation about crystal skulls. Number 2. It paid tribute to Marcus Brody from the original films. One of the most touching elements woven into Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull is the subtle but heartfelt tribute to Marcus Brody, the well-meaning museum curator and trusted ally of Indiana Jones. Denholm Elliott played this role in the original trilogy, who was a source of both humor and warmth. Sadly, Elliott passed away in 1992, leaving the character absent from the fourth installment. Yet Spielberg and his team ensured Marcus's presence would still be felt. The filmmakers honored him in 3 different ways. First, in Indy's office at Marshall College, a framed portrait of Marcus hangs on the wall. Second, the campus also features a statue of Marcus, commemorating his legacy at the university. In a wonderfully fitting moment of humor, the statue is accidentally destroyed during a chaotic motorcycle chase, portraying Marcus's own history of unintentional clumsiness. Finally, a small desk photo serves as a personal reminder for Indy that Marcus was not just a colleague, but a dear friend. Number 1. Cate Blanchett modeled Irina's look after 1950s yearbook photos. Her portrayal of Colonel Dr. Irina Spalko in Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull stood out for her commanding screen presence and distinctive look. Blanchett, known for immersing herself fully into each role, helped shape Irina's appearance with a particular inspiration. When preparing for the part of the cold and calculating Soviet agent, she researched 1950s yearbooks to capture the era's essence. From those old photographs, she noticed a recurring style, a sharply cut, geometric bang paired with severe, practical hairstyles. This discovery directly influenced Irina's iconic short fringe haircut, giving her an almost military edge while maintaining her feminine beauty. Director Steven Spielberg and costume designer Mary Zofris embraced Blanchett's idea, pairing the haircut with Spalko's tailored gray uniform, sword, and leather gloves. The result was a villain who was both intimidating and memorable. What have you learned from these weird facts about Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull? Share with us in the comments section and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Hit the like button and watch other videos on this channel before you leave.